Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Beer with the Boss, the podcast where a guy and his boss have a beer and talk about technology. Today, we're going to discuss the fascinating world of monolith and microservices applications. So, grab a cold one and join us for an in depth conversation on this intriguing topic. I'm Rodrigo Matos, as I said. I work at Webera.
Hey, Rodrigo. And excited to be here. I'm Joe Zamboni, co-founder and CEO of Webera and co-host of the show. It's a pleasure to discuss these cutting-edge software trends. But before we start, Rodrigo, what are you drinking?
So I'm drinking something I've already had, I guess, a couple of times during this seasons. It's Spaten, is a beer originally from Munich, but now it's being brewed in Brazil as well. It's Pilsener, but it's a little bit more alcoholic than the normal Pilsener. Is 5.2. Quite nice, quite interesting. How about you, Joe? What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a Foster's, which comes in a can of 750 milliliters, so it's more than a pint, which is awesome. It's like I'll have to talk a long time or drink very fast. And also I find out that this is not or is Australian, but made by American brothers that moved there, and they start a brewery there. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of a global beer already in the 1800s.
So what should we call it? Should we call it Australian or American?
That's a good question. I was thinking about is this American, Australian? When I moved to the US, right, you always think about mullets, right? Those mullet guys from the US. But I learned that mullets are most Australian, so yeah. It's like huge trend there in Australia. So it's like, I don't know. I think they are all the crazies from England. They escaped the country and went to Australia and for 3 years US.
That's what they say, nice. Right? They send a ship full of crazy people, but somehow the mullets also got to Argentina, right? The Argentinians love mullets as well to this day. So, Joe, everybody's talking about this Amazon Prime Video article or this Amazon article where they talk about Prime Video and how they save a lot of money by moving from microservices to a monolith application. So I'd like to ask for your 2 cents on this article. Have you had the chance to read it? What do you think about this? Like, what are the main advantages of microservices for starters?
Yeah, sure, Rodrigo. We can discuss that. One of the primary advantages of microservices is the excellent scalability, right? Because you're gonna pay only for the right resource, only what you use. Like if you use some function, you're just gonna pay for that function while it's using. And I think also that was the demise of that architecture in their case. They were basically trying to run formerly no batch process with a microservices architecture, which is not bad. It's just you're just going to spend more money. It's like what people say that is when you wanted to lose your house, paying money to AWS is just make a loop function, call another function in Lambda, and then they'll call each other until they die, and then until you don't have any money. Also, so I guess microservices and monoliths, they have both advantages and disadvantages. We just need to be exactly sure what do you want from the architecture that you are doing, like build the architecture around the problem, not the problem around the architecture. I guess that's the most important thing. So if you want to fix, we are learning too. So yeah.
I love that. Like build what did you say? Build the problem around your, how's it? Say it again.
No, build the architecture around the problem, not the problem around the architecture.
Yeah. Amazing. And what would be some of the challenges, in your opinion? Some of the challenges of the microservices approach.
So I think is the principal or the major drawback is the complexity, because you have to think about all the communication between them, how they will authenticate, how they will handle storage, when they will handle the storage, which is also the benefit, because you can have independent storage for each one of them, or you can have a different database or a different technology, or even a different language. Like you can develop parts of application in Python, parts in JavaScript, whatever language is more appropriate to the task you can use. So though these bring challenges also because you don't have one developer that is good in every language. So you have to have a different developer for each one of those solutions. Maybe, I don't know, sometimes you have to. But I guess the main difficulty is to maintain and monitor the whole thing, right? So you have to keep an eye on everything in different parts of your stack. And also the data consistency, right? You have to make sure that each execution of each microservice has the data that it requires to execute, not from the perspective only of who is executing the data, but also who is consuming the data. So it's a complex thing to maintain.
Yeah, that's interesting, Joe. And moving on to monolithic applications, what would be the main advantages of like building a monolith instead of an application with microservices, if there are any?
No, there's many. You have to be slower on the question so I can drink the beer.
Sorry, yeah, you have to have bigger sips, right? Because it's a big can.
Yeah, because it's huge. This thing is huge. So yeah, of course, the primary advantage of monolithic is the simplicity, right? It's much easier to have like one developer develop the whole thing, which is also a bad thing because you have only one developer and nobody else understands the code. But there's fewer components, much easier to maintain. Like you have only one repo, just a few, but it doesn't really scale much. It's more like microservices. So like there is even a question that we do on our DevOps test when people join Webera is asking them, can you make a parallel between, I guess the question goes like that, between shell scripts and microservices? Because I guess the way that you think about, I'm not sure if that's when it was born, but the way that you think about shell scripts where you concatenate multiple commands and get a result in the end is almost the same way that you do with microservices. You concatenate multiple services and get a result. It's just the difference that you have a shell script which is local, a monolith, let's say, but you have different binaries that execute completely different things, and you get information from one and throw in another, either by using pipes or either by using files, and you create this workflow of multiple inputs and get a different output each one of them, and then you have this architecture. So in a way, the idea of having a microservice architecture is not something new. So we learned a long time ago that keep things in a big block monolith, it's hard and hard to maintain in a way because you have to any change of the code. So maintainability, it's how can I say? It's a complex term to use, like because you can be complex to maintain a code if it's in a multi is in a monolith application, but it can be also complex if you are in a microservice application. It depends on what are your battles, what you want to do with your application. Like in their case, an example, get like the Linux kernel. It's basically a big monolith. If you want to change something, you have the modules or something, but you basically have to recompile the whole thing at some point, and then reboot your machine to do a new version. And there is some tricks that people can use to not reboot, but they are not enough sometimes. Or if you pick like a monolith application, you'll be the same, right? You have to restart the whole application to have a new version. Which nowadays we can use like an example. I think for Instagram is still a monolith, and Facebook is still a monolith, or most of it is a monolith. Big parts of the main page at least is a monolith, where they deploy the whole application every time, and then there is a proxy in front of it that decides which version of the application each user uses. So, and then their data is stored within that version or different version. So I guess we have example on our clients where you see them starting very fast development and they using a monolith, and then at some point they hit a point where they cannot do changes fast because the monolith is too hard to change. If you change one thing, it breaks everything. So, but then you have the same problem with microservice because you change a microservice and you change the API of that microservice and everyone else is broken. So it it is more about knowledge than really architectural definition, I guess. Anyway, I hope I did reply or answer your question, but it's a very complex
Yeah,
subject. It's
absolutely.
just like that. The internet now is like everybody's. Oh, I told you, monolith is better. It's like no, guys. It's just one use case that monoliths are better. Batch process. It's always better. It's like there's no way that batch process will run faster on a microservice. You don't need to even think about it.
No, by experience, I wasn't working with a product team at the time, but one of my past experiences when I was working as a customer success manager, there were a lot of feature requests for this specific product, and it was so difficult to create new features because the application got so big. It was a monolith, and it got so big, so big, so big that every time a new feature was created, like 5 different other parts of the application would break. And I remember that back then the product team struggled a lot and started like moving from a monolithic to a microservices approach. However, I guess, as you said, it would make sense to create, like, to have a monolith to be able to deliver things faster and validate products faster. Does it make sense, like, to for the go-to-market phase, validate an idea, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the beginning is much easier. You have like one full stack engineer, or a couple of them building that beast monolith that will do whatever thing you whatever thing you want, right? Is you can have very complex applications built on a monolith. It's just like the change management process from an IT perspective, let's say. You can build a monolith preparing to be a microservice architecture in the future. Like ourselves, we learned the hard way that building a microservice architecture from the beginning is slow, right? Our Green Mainframe product is a completely microservice application, and we are stuck now with many microservices. We changed something. The team is not that big, so when you have a small team, I guess don't do microservices because it's pretty hard to people to keep track of the whole thing. So uh, I guess one of the architecture decisions that you have to think about is what's the size of your team. So, but also because the way that we build the application using an Next.js and other parts of the application, and we have a good developer, full stack developer, we can go from microservices to monolith in about a week, or vice versa. We did that already once or twice. So it's just time consuming, but you can program or develop your code in a way that you can make it look like it's a monolith, but uses different functions internally, rely on different interface, and so it's prepared in a way to the future. Just have to make sure that the authentication is correct. You don't use like in our case a front end application, so it's depends on the user. But whatever batch we have, it's a microservice anyway, like a microservice, like an independent service, not multiple microservices. Like for an example, we have the provisioning part. Is it just our workflow? We didn't even develop something. We just use something that the main application goes and call the web service, the microservice that is Argo itself, our workflow and provisioning the stack.
So your advice to organizations would be something on the lines of understand what you need, the size of your team, how fast do you have to develop things, something like that, like to decide between microservices and monolith.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong. I mean, the only right or wrong is how long you take to make the product or how much we spend after, right? Because if you have a microservice architecture, okay, that it's just waiting for users to do some actions, you have no users. I mean, you have expended money to build it, but you're not spending much money on running it, which is good. So you're actually saving money on microservices in this case. But if you have an application with a lot of users consuming a lot of traffic, you can also scale it a lot if you have a microservice architecture. If you have a monolith, there's some point when you scale that application that the machine may be not enough. There's no enough machine to run their application, or even to build like development and test environments. You have to spend a lot of money to run that big beast. Like we have some of our clients that have issues like that. You have an API that uses, just to start, you have like gigabytes of memory, several of them just to start the application because it's a big monolith. So the developer cannot even run on their laptops. They have to run inside of a Kubernetes cluster just to make sure that the thing works. So it is quite a challenge to run that monolith. And to them to split in multiple applications, and the way that they develop, that they need the entire application run to actually test anything, it's not feasible. So they will benefit for sure of multiple microservices, well defined, where each one is completely independent of the other. They can test, they can validate independently. So that's kind of where microservices were born, right?
That's interesting, Joe. And is there any kind of best of both worlds situation where you can have like an hybrid approach and use like microservices and monolith at the same time? Or is that a silly question?
No, it's not. People should always, so like I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, people should really build the architecture around the problem. So if parts of your application needs to be a monolith, do it. There's no right or wrong on this. Just make sure that you build in a way that you can split the configuration in the future, the models in the future, in a way that is scalable. And the opposite also, if you have a small API that you need to deploy that is completely independent of your business, just bring you some data. Like we may use many web services those days. Like we use web services for build, for actually like send messages with SendGrid and others. So it's completely okay to do those things. Hybrid, go hybrid.
Very good. Well, Joe, thank you so much for sharing your insights on this subject. It's trending a lot out there right now. Everybody's talking about it. And thank you all for listening to us again. Interact with this episode. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. It's very important for us that you leave your feedback as well. And let us know what you want us to talk about in the next episode. And also if you have any guests you want to see here, or if you want to be here, let us know. Just reach out and it will be a pleasure to have a beer with you. Thank you so much, Joe. See you next week, man.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Yeah, see you. And don't forget also, we have a website now ready. Thank you so much. Beerwiththeboss.com.
Yeah, beerwiththeboss.com. There we go. See you, Joe. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Bye.